Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I am Andres Villalba, I am a sales engineer at Sencha, and today we're going to be talking about interactive dashboards with Ext JS, and we're going to be using different methods to build live charts and real-time analytics. This is what we will be doing today. We're going to create several charts and dashboards. First, we're just going to create a basic chart that it's going to load its data with a data store. Once the data is retrieved, we're going to do some polling to retrieve more updates from the backend. However, this is the simplest way to do it, and this is having the front end poll the backend. Afterwards, we're going to create a line chart that it's going to listen to a WebSocket, and it's going to get updated whenever the WebSocket sends us more information. And finally, we're going to be creating a dashboard that has a WebSocket also, and it's going to be loading information into it in different ways. If we have time, we're also going to be looking on how to style this application to make it look a little bit more modern. Before we actually start, we need to create our project, so we need to follow these initial steps. First, we're going to create a basic XJS project. We're going to add the charts module to our application by adding a couple of lines into the app.json file. Then we're going to refresh the application, rebuild the application, and finally update the menu panel. Okay, so I'm gonna be creating that project. I'm gonna go into this folder here and I'm going to open a PowerShell window. And here it's where I'm going to be creating this project. All we have to do is type sencha. We have to specify where the SDK is saved, which in my case is 3 folders down. Okay, and there it is. Now that I have the SDK, I'm gonna say generate app. Okay, I'm gonna say classic since I'm going to be using the classic toolkit. Okay, and finally, what I'm going to specify is where it's going to be created. In this case, in the same folder. Oh, and sorry, and I'm gonna specify the app name. So I'm just gonna say, let's just call it app. This is gonna take a few minutes, but once it is created, I can go and do what I explained before, add the charts and build my application. Okay, let's open the project in our code editor. And now that it's here, let's open that app.json file. Here we have a requires option. I'm just gonna say charts so that we can include everything there. Gonna go back into our PowerShell window and I'm just going to refresh the application. Okay, this is going to read from that JSON file and it's going to refresh the options that we have there. And since we haven't done this yet, I'm also going to build the application for development. Of course, if this was ready, instead of typing development, I would be using production to create my final application. And once this is done, we can try our application and see what we have. I can use SendChap Watch for that, or I can set up my own domain. So whatever works for you will be fine. And this is it. This is how it looks. Basically, it has 4 options over there. Okay, so as always, let's go and modify the menu. So I'll just go into View, Main. I'll open the main.js file. Something that I like to do is I get rid of the body padding since that's going to add a margin to all the sections. And then I'm going to take all those sections out for now. And I'm just going to keep the first one, but I'm going to change a few things. So I'm going to call this refresh since this is going to be the chart that has a refresh button and also that auto refresh on the front end. So I'm just gonna give it a clock icon there. The way this works is we got the items array, which is basically the sections, and then each one has its own items, which is the panel that is going to be appearing when you select the section. So for that, I'm going to create a new view and I'm going to require that view. I know that it's going to be called app view dot examples. And since it's going to be the first example, I'm just going to call it refresh chart. Okay, and down here, I have to use the X type. So that's going to be refresh chart. And then if I follow the name of the class, I'm gonna be creating that class inside the examples folder, which is also inside the view folder. So here I'm just gonna say examples, and there I'm just gonna say new refresh chart.js. So now we have everything we need in the main panel. And now over here, what I'm going to be doing, that I'm going to be creating the actual XJS class. I'm just gonna say xdefine. I'm gonna use the same name. So this one that I have over here, it must match the name of the file. I'm going to extend from a basic panel. So that's going to be xpanel panel. I have to give it a next type name, which is the name that I'm going to be using down here on the menu. Later on, I'm going to be creating the chart. For now, let me just show you something simple. So I'm going to put here a title. I'm going to say refresh chart. I'm just going to put some HTML text there for now. And before I forget, there's something else. It's a good idea on all the items over here to give it the layout named fit, which will basically tell the panel to fill the whole screen. Well, not the whole screen, the whole space. So let me save. So now we only have one section there, and it has that title and that content. And that's basically it. So let me explain to you exactly what we're going to be creating here. Okay, now that we have the menu, now that we have created everything that we need, let's create our first chart. Like I said, this is just going to be a bar chart, and it's going to be reading from a data store. And this data store is going to be loading the data from a Node.js server. Basically, let's create a chart. Let's set it up as a bar chart. Let's create the store. Let's retrieve the data. Then we're going to add a refresh button that is going to force the store to reload the data. And afterwards, we're going to create a timer that actually does this automatically. Okay, we're backed into our refresh chart file. So let's actually work on it. I'm going to take that HTML text out, and I'm going to start building the actual chart and its options. So first, let's just create a toolbar. That toolbar is going to be on the top, and it's going to have two buttons. One, it's a pause button so that the chart does not refresh anymore. I'm gonna give it a font awesome icon, and it's just gonna be the pause button. And I'm gonna put a handler here. What's going to happen on that handler? We'll talk about it in a few minutes. And I'm going to create a second button, okay? And this is just going to be the refresh button. So once again, I'm using an icon. I'm just gonna say sync. This is a panel, has that toolbar, and now what I'm going to do is inside that panel, I'm going to create a few more items, actually just one item, and that's going to actually be the Cartesian chart. This Cartesian chart needs a width and a height, or I can also tell this panel that its contents are going to be using a layout fit. So basically, I only have one item and it's gonna fill the full space. I need to specify a store, and then for any chart, I need the access setup, and also I need the actual chart series. Okay, I need those two. So for the axis, I have two. One is a numerical axis, and the other one is the text axis, which is basically called the category. So here I got numeric. I want it on the left. For now, let's say that I do have a grid there, and I can give it a title. So I'm just gonna say value. Okay, and the other axis is going to be something similar. So this is going to be category. Now this is going to be located at the bottom. I'm not going to give it a grade for now. And the title is going to be the sales representative, since what we are creating a sales chart. Okay. The Cartesian is the container. What we want to do is actually create the series. So for that, I'm going to specify the type of the series. It could be a bar, it could be a line, it could be area. Okay. And I have to also specify the X field that is going to come from the store, and also the Y field which is going to come from the store. I know that what I'm going to do is use value and name. So name for the X field and value for the Y field. So I'm almost done with this one, although I do not have a store like I mentioned before. So what I want to do here is to connect to the backend to get the data. I can go and create a store over here. That would be the best course of action. I have been doing it that way for a long time and I have been showing you in different webinars that way. But for now, I'm just going to do it here. I'm just going to say Ext create. I'm going to create a store. So that's ext.data.store. And then I can specify the options. I can create a model, but once again, I want to put everything here. So I'm just going to specify fields. And I got a name field and a value field. I'm gonna say that it's going to auto load, and then I need a proxy to connect to the backend. So I'm gonna specify that it's going to be using Ajax. It's going to connect to a certain URL. I gotta set up the reader. The reader, I'm telling it that the data is going to come as JSON. The root property is just going to be data. So what's the URL? Well, this depends on what you're doing. What I did is that I created a node server, just a basic script that it's just creating the data at random. I got it running right now, and this is running on localhost port 3001. And since this is an API, I need to specify the route to it. So I know I have it under API data. So now let's go and test it out. And as you can see, there it is. This is the data that I have. And that's being created at random. Let me show you exactly what I have. I won't be spending much time here, but as you can see, this is just a basic Node.js script. I'm using Express. I'm getting rid of any course restrictions. I got the port, and this is what I'm doing. I'm just creating the data at random. Then I'm just defining the endpoint. When that endpoint is called, this is the data that I'm going to be creating. Basically, I'm just replacing the value. So this is not a Node.js webinar, so that's basically all that I'm going to mention right now. And let's say that we want to use this button to actually refresh over here, okay, and load some different data. So let's just do that. But also before I do that, I'm going to push the buttons to the right. So all I do is inside the toolbar, I'm just gonna send the buttons to the right with this string there, with that little arrow. So now they show over here. And now what I want to do is actually just refresh. So right here, I'm gonna get the panel and then I'm gonna get the Cartesian chart and its store. So there are different ways to do it. For example, I can get the actual Cartesian chart by saying this. Right now, I am inside the button and that's the parameter the handler receives. So I can just say up and this will take me up one level to the toolbar, or I can give it the name of a class, an X type, and it will take me up until it finds that X type. So it will go up to the toolbar and up to the panel, and that's it. And then I can go down to the Cartesian. So basically, I'm over here, and down Cartesian is going to take me down until it finds that X type. Or I can give it an item ID. I'm gonna call this chart. And instead of using down, I can use get component and specify that name. Okay, now that I have the object, what I'm going to do is object get store. I'm just going to tell it to load again. Okay, and let's try it out. Now, every time that I hit on refresh, the data is going to be different. Now, what I want is also for XGS to reload the chart every second or every 5 seconds by itself. And that's why I have this button over here, because I can pause that refresh or just keep it refreshing. So let's just do that. It's also simple. We could use a basic JavaScript timer. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to use XJS for this. So I'm going to be using the init component method, which is basically the constructor. So I'm just going to say init component. This method gets called once the component is created. I have to explicitly call its parent to run the original class, the one we're extending from. I need to put it right at the beginning or right at the end, depending on what I need. Over here, what I'm going to do is start the refresh event. So I'm just gonna say start refresh, okay? And that method, I'm going to define it here. So start refresh, okay, just like that. And from here, I'm going to create my task manager, which is the way I can create intervals or timeouts inside Ext.js. To keep it on a local variable of my refresh chart, I'm also going to create my own variable here. So I'm just gonna call it timer. Put it as null. And then down here, I'm gonna use the scope variable me to make it easier. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm also going to get the chart. This time I'm inside this method. This method belongs to the panel. So I don't need to go up. All I have to do is actually get the object directly. So it would be something like this. Okay, now I'm getting the chart. From here, I'm just gonna start the task. So I'm just gonna say me and timer equals ext task manager dot start. So the task manager allows me to create as many timers as I need, and it receives structure there with a run method, and that's what's gonna happen when the interval completes. And it also receives the actual interval time in milliseconds. I'm just gonna say every 3 seconds, do this method. And as you might be guessing, all I'm going to do is object get store load. So this way, the application is going to be reloading every 3 seconds without me having to push the refresh button. And as you can see, now the values are changing. Okay. However, we're polling the backend. So we're wasting bandwidth to connect to the backend and checking if there is something new. But still, I'm just going to finish this example. So now that I have this, I'm also going to create a stop refresh method. And I'm going to use this one to actually stop the task. So here I'm going to be obtaining the same things at the beginning, just copy and paste. And I am also going to check if the timer is stopped. If it's stopped, all I have to do is call the start refresh method again, restart the timer. Otherwise, what I'm going to be doing is actually stop it. So all I have to do once again, it's call the task manager and just say stop and specify the name of the timer. I'm going to be doing a few more things over here. You can do it with or without util there. I'm also missing the handler over here. What I want is to start and stop the task whenever the button is pressed. So that's quite straightforward. What I'm going to do is also get the panel, but this time, instead of refreshing the chart, what I'm going to do is just call that new method. So this up panel, and then I'm gonna say panel dot stop refresh. And before we test, I noticed that I made a simple mistake. It's me timer, and here I typed me time. So let's save and let's go ahead and test it again. Okay, it's updating by itself. Let's pause it. And now it's stopped. It's no longer updating. Let's remove the pause. And now it's loading again. So I'm just gonna change the text and the icon there. That will be something quick to do. And I should do it on the button, but I'm going to do it down here since I already have the if statement there. So I'm gonna send the actual button to make it easier. So on stop refresh, I'm gonna send the button. And now if I'm starting the task, I'm gonna change the icon. So set icon CLS as in class. I'm gonna put the pause button there. And then I'm gonna change the text and I'm gonna say pause. Otherwise, instead of the pause symbol, I'm gonna change it for play and I'm gonna say start. And let's check that. Now it's updating. I'll pause it. It's not doing anything anymore. Let's start. And we can also hit the refresh button if we want to. So that's basically it for this first chart. Let's move on and see what the second chart is going to be doing. Okay, now that we have finished the first example, as you can see, we were just doing some polling, connecting to the backend continuously, and that's not the best idea. So instead of doing that, what we're going to do is create a WebSocket. This is going to be done with just plain JavaScript, and we're gonna create our own XJS class that is gonna help us with this. So I got the code here on the right, but let's do it ourselves. Let's create the WebSocket. We can put it anywhere we want, but it's a good idea to create a util folder and there put our utils. So right now I'm just gonna create a WebSocket JS file and I'll try to be as fast as I can. So I'm just copying and pasting from my notes. So I'm just creating this WebSocket utility here. It's extending from X component. This is the X type. I have a few variables here. I have a socket, which is this is going to be the JavaScript object, the URL that we're going to be calling, and a callback method. Okay. And just like we did with the chart, I'm going to have an init component parameter here. If we were using the modern toolkit, instead of using init component, I would be using initialize. Anyways, so I'm just going to be calling the parent. Remember, it's a good idea to use the me variable to avoid any scope issues. I'm going to create a socket. I can create a method if I wanted to, but right now I'm just going to do everything here. I want to make sure that the URL is set. So as long as the URL is not an empty string, everything should work fine. So if it's empty, I'm just going to put a message on the console. So console log define socket URL. Otherwise, what I'm going to be doing, it's just create the actual socket. Basically, let me just put the four events here. Okay, this is quite simple. We have a message event, we have an open, close, and error events. I'm not going to be doing anything with those three, but you could do something else if you wanted to. Just gonna use the message one right now because this event is going to trigger whenever we receive something from the backend from the URL we specify. So I'm gonna put inside that event a few more options. So first I'm going to get the data, it comes from event.data, and I'm gonna parse the data. And second, I'm going to check if the callback method is defined. If it is, I'm just gonna call it and send the data. So we got the events, but we're missing the most important part, which is to start the socket. So that's quite simple. Gonna be saving it inside that socket variable, and I'm just gonna use JavaScript to create the socket. And that all that it requires is the URL. So this will create it. This will add the events, and once we get data, this is gonna send it to whoever created this component. So let's go ahead and see what's next. Okay, now that we have the socket, let's create our chart. It's quite similar to the previous one. So we're gonna create an empty store. We're gonna set up this chart as a Cartesian. The series type is going to be line, and then we're gonna connect to the WebSocket. Whenever the backend updates, it's gonna send us the data to the front end, and we don't have any need to pull data. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so let's do exactly what we have talked about. I'm going to be creating the new chart. So for now, I'm just gonna duplicate that example that we had. I'm gonna call this WebSocket chart. So since I'm creating this new class, I'm gonna do that here too. Let's say here WebSocket. Let's put a dash there. Now that we have this, let's go into our main menu, just add everything we need. So we're gonna add the WebSocket chart to the requires array, and we're also going to duplicate that option down there. So I'm just gonna say here WebSocket, the title. I'm gonna add another icon there, and this should be the name we are using as the X type for that new one. Okay, so this one. Right now they're the same chart, so I need to apply a few more changes. So let me take that toolbar out, that timer out too. I'll take out those two methods that we created before. Okay. I'm gonna leave the init component there since I'm going to be using it in a few minutes. And that store, it'll be something even simpler. So I'm gonna take out the connection because now the front end is not going to be asking for the data to the backend. The backend is gonna send it to us. So I'm just gonna add an empty data array inside the store. And this time around, I'm just gonna do it with a line series there. Of course, this is not going to work because we have pretty much nothing there. So let's actually connect this to the WebSocket. So I'm gonna put it here inside a variable. I'm going to create my own object, and this must have the name that I used over here. So app utilities.websocket, and then I can send it any parameters that I want. So I'm gonna be using the URL. In this case, it's a WebSocket. I have it on a different port, so it's going to be localhost port 3002, and then I have a callback method. Of course, the best idea is to just have one port open and have everything there. That's what we're going to be doing with the dashboard. But for now, since I'm explaining, I have one in one port and a different one in a different port. Okay. This is going to receive the data. If you remember, when we created the WebSocket, it's sending the data to that callback method. So this is the callback method, and that's the data it's receiving. So all I'm going to do right now is just add that data. The data we will be receiving is just a pair of values. It's the time and a random value. And of course, we need to get this store to make it work. So let me just put it here in a variable. Anyway, we want to get the store. I'm just gonna say get component, and there I'm just gonna get the actual chart. Remember, that's the item ID. And then I'm just gonna get the store there. And since we copied and pasted from the previous one, let's make sure that this is correct. Left panel, it's just the price. The bottom axis, it's actually the time. And on the left, we have so value, and on the bottom, this is going to be time, like I just mentioned. So hopefully I have everything set up correctly. Let's try it out. And every 3 seconds, it's going to be loading. As you can see, the line is appearing there. We don't have any dots, so we should create some markers because this is just a basic line. It'll be easier to understand with a marker. So all I have to do is inside the series, add that marker here. And I'm also going to add a label. Okay, let's try it out once again and let's see what happens. So like as I said, every 3 seconds, we're gonna see something appear. So that's the first value. And since I also added the value, the label, that's why we see the value over it. Okay. And this is gonna continue adding more and more points. So if we don't want it to go forever, what we can do is just add an if statement here. So let's say if we got more than, I don't know, 20 ticks there, what I'm going to do is just remove the first one. Okay, this way we won't get an infinite number of values with only 20 there. Okay, because as you can see, we have a lot there. Okay, so this is how it works with WebSocket. It's easy to do, nothing out of this world, nothing complex. So the following thing we're gonna be doing, it's actually creating the dashboard. I'm gonna go through the layout quite quickly, and I'm gonna spend more time showing you how to connect to the actual WebSocket, and then we're gonna theme the application. Finally, as our main three examples, we're gonna build a dashboard. I'm not gonna have the time to show you every single detail, so basically, I'm just gonna go through it in a general way, and then I'm gonna show you bits and pieces. We're gonna be building that chart, that dashboard that it's there on the left, and let me show you how it works. Okay, so let's create the dashboard. So basically, I'm just gonna be doing the same thing. Gonna duplicate what I had, be dashboard. Gonna give it a home icon, and let's just call the X type dashboard. Okay. Also, I need to include that inside my requires folder. So that's gonna be dashboard like that. Actually, let's put it on a different folder, just like that. And so inside view, I'm gonna create a dashboard folder and sorry, a dashboard file. Okay, and like I said before, just to go a little bit faster, I'm gonna copy and paste a few things from my notes. Notice that this time my layout is not gonna be fit. It's going to be HBox, and I'll explain why in a sec. And let's make sure everything is set up correctly. Let's save and test. Okay, we have an empty view here. So before I continue, let me just remind you the different types of layouts we have. If I go into the kitchen sink, you'll be able to see that we have several different layouts. I have been using Pit to get the full space. I could have used table to locate different objects in my screen, but what I'm going to be using is the HBox and VBox layouts combined. So I'm gonna create the box layout to have two main panels, and then I'm gonna divide the first one into three smaller ones, the second one into three vertical ones. Okay, and that's all I'm going to be doing. I'm trying to do something simple. However, if this was a more complex dashboard, I would be using a lot more elements there. Anyways, to just do that, let's actually start creating the items that are located inside of it. Like I said, I'm gonna have two different columns. So the first one, it's just basically the first panel. And the second one, it's the second panel. Both of them are gonna have a plex value of 1. The second one, I'm just gonna give it a max width of 320 pixels. Okay, so that we can see what's going on, I'm gonna give each one a title. So I'm just gonna call this traffic engagement. And the second one, I'm gonna call it server health. Okay, and then I'm going to divide this one into three columns there. Gonna have the same layout inside of it. And now that one is gonna have also its own three items. Same thing, I'm just gonna say Plex one, gonna give it a title. This first one is going to be called just website visitors. Okay, the second one is going to be called page views, also with a flex value of 1. And the last one is going to be called traffic sources. Okay, and the difference with the other one is that the other one is going to be using a layout of VBox. So this is gonna put everything one over the other in a vertical way, of course. So what I'm going to have here is I'm gonna use some random values to pretend that I'm showing you the CPU temp. I'm gonna show you the memory usage. And finally, I'm gonna show the disk usage. Okay. And this is just an example, it could be something else, but if we go and take a look at this, it should look something like this. So we have traffic and engagement, which has three columns, and server health that has these three rows. So I'm going to play a little bit with it so that it looks a little bit better. For example, I'm gonna add some body padding there. So on my main panel, I'm gonna add a body style and a body padding. So I'm gonna take the same body padding and I'm gonna put it on all those three items there. But instead of doing it that way, I'm gonna add the default value here, and I can do the same thing for the flex value. That way, I don't need it on all of them. Okay, and let's try it out. And it should look something similar, but it'll have that extra margin you can see over here. Okay, and I will actually add a margin here. Let's say margin 8 pixels, and I'll do the same over here. Okay, that way I have this setup over here. I'm not gonna keep all those titles. This is just temporary as we work on it. Now, I can put every single chart here, but this is gonna become quite a big file. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is create one file for each one. So let me create one for the website visitors, another file for the page views, and another file for the traffic sources. Okay, that way I can have different classes for each different chart. So I'm gonna add a requires array because I'm going to need that to actually link to all of those. So now that I have the names, I know that it's going to be app view dashboard, traffic sources, page views, and website visitors. Okay, and I'm going to have to add the X type here instead of having the title. So I'm just gonna say X type, and this is going to be the first one, which is website visitors. I'm gonna take the title out for now. Then X type page views, and finally X type traffic sources. Okay, and to make it work, I need those classes over here. So once again, to try to take a little less time, what I'm going to do is create each chart by copying and pasting from a different file. So traffic sources, and let's give it an X type, and this should be app, this should be traffic sources, and of course this should be the folder where we are located. Okay, and I'm putting the Cartesian chart right there to make it easy. I'm gonna copy and gonna paste and paste. So this is website visitors, okay, page views, and the other one we already have it. Okay, now so let's go to the first one, which is the website visitors one, and I'm going to base this on a different example. So we have the type, we have the extents, and now we're gonna add everything else we need. I'm gonna create my own property, which is going to be called URL, and this is connecting to this endpoint over here, okay? I'm gonna set up a store, just like we did before, and this is just a dummy store. It has the fields, but it has no data. Whenever we create a chart, the best idea for a title is to put the title inside the chart, and the way we do that is with captions, and then we specify the title, okay? Then I'm just going to continue by creating the axis. We have a visitor count as the numeric left axis, and just type for the category at the bottom. Gonna set up the series, which is basically just a bar chart. We have an X field and a Y field, and just one color, at least for now. Okay, and then I'm gonna use init component to do exactly what we did before. So let's go to the WebSocket chart. Just gonna copy this and put it here. Okay, but instead of loading this URL, what I'm going to be doing is loading the URL that I have on the main class. So that one over there. Okay, so let's do it just like this. Okay, and now that I have the value of me there, what I'm going to be doing here, something a little bit more simple. It's gonna say me get store, gonna remove everything, and then me get store, and I'm going to add whatever came from the backend. Okay, so it's basically the same web socket, but now it's going to connect to a different URL. And whenever we receive data, I'm going to receive everything from the chart and put the new data. There's a different way to do it. This time I'm just going to remove everything. On the other chart, I'm going to do it a little bit different. And of course, before I test, I also need to rename all the other classes to whatever the name of the file is. Okay, let's try it out. And as you can see, well, it appears empty at the beginning, but once the backend sends the data, we get this information over here. And now this is refreshing any given time. I think for now I have it on the backend that every 3 seconds it's going to refresh. So now I'm gonna create the next chart. It's going to be a pie chart, and I'm just gonna follow the same idea. So it's also quite simple to do. It's just a few different options there. So that's going to be the class of page views. So instead of a Cartesian chart, it's going to be a polar chart, okay? And I'm going to be doing pretty much the same. So I have a URL, which is an endpoint. I have a dummy store. I'm going to put a title in it. And I'm going to create a series. This time around, it's a little bit different, but it's also quite similar. So it's type pi. We have an angle field, which is the value. We have a label, which is the field type. And I also have a display rotate. Then I have the option to highlight. I have set up the colors. If I do not do this, it's just gonna use the basic colors. And then I have a tooltip. Whenever I put the mouse over it, it's gonna render what the tooltip says. So basically just gonna show me the type, colon, and then the value. And same idea. Now what I have to do is also to create the socket. So I'm just gonna use the same init component method that I used before. Okay, but I'm gonna do it with one minor difference. So for now, let me just bring it as it is. Okay, and if you remember, this is going to be removing all the values and adding the new ones. That's not exactly what I want this time around. What I want is to actually just change the value, but keep the types. So let me get the store into a variable. So I'm just gonna say me get store. I'm gonna check if I have data. If I do not have any data, meaning is at the empty array, then load everything. If that's not the case, then replace the values. So I'm just gonna check if the store dot data dot items length is 0. That would mean that the data is empty. Then what I would do is to the store, I will add everything that I received. Otherwise, what I will be doing is I would be looping through all the elements in the array. There are plenty of ways to do it. Right now, I just want to do it this way. So store data items length one by one. Okay. And then to the store, I'm gonna get the field that I specify here. So this is gonna get the first one. And I'm going to set the value to whatever came from the backend. I know as a fact in this specific example that all the values will come in the same order every single time. But if that was not the case, I would also have to check that I'm overwriting the correct value. Okay, and let's test this out. And just like last time, it's gonna look empty until it loads everything from the backend. There we go. Okay. I could add some inner padding so that the chart doesn't cut on the edges, but right now I'm just gonna leave it like it is. And of course, I could have a lot more different KPIs and charts here so that it looks better, having maybe 2 rows instead of one. But for now, just as an example, I think this works fine. Okay. Now the last option that I'm gonna add here is just a grid. And inside that grid, I'm going to show some data. So let's do that. And for that, I have the traffic sources class. And instead of extending from a chart, I'm just going to extend from a grid panel. And that should also be simple. So I'm going to be doing something really similar. So once again, I have the URL. This time around, it's going to be this API there. I'm going to create an empty store. I am also going to add a simple title. This time, this is a panel title. Now I'm going to set up the columns that I need. This is the way I set up a grid. So I have these 3 columns here, an ID, a type, and a value. I'm specifying the actual text and the data index. This comes from the store, and the width either in pixels or in a flex value. And what are we going to do? Well, what we did the first time. Just gonna do it this way, okay? Take in mind that I could have also used the basic example that I that we did at the beginning, meaning the refresh chart. Just have a normal store and have it reload whenever you press a button or whenever you put a timer on it. But for now, I also used a backend service. Of course, let's put there app.util and let's test. And as you can see, now we have everything there. Of course, this is not the best layout, but I think it works. Now, all those three KPIs on the right are going to be using the same style, which is basically just a polar chart with a gauge. Okay, so let's just do that. So I'm gonna create a new class and I'm gonna use that for all of them. Okay, so I'm just gonna duplicate one of the charts that I have. It'll be easier. So probably I'm just gonna grab the one that it's a polar chart. So the page views. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy and paste. I'm gonna call this a gauge. Okay, like that, gauge chart. And let's rename it. It's going to be a polar chart, of course, and let's call it gauge chart over here too. And of course, this is going to be a different URL. This one will come from our main dashboard, so I'm just gonna leave it empty for now. Same deal. I'm just gonna have an empty store, but this time this is just gonna be the value. Okay, I'm gonna put an empty value there. So this is just a starting value, which is gonna be 0. I could omit it. I could put just a 50, 100, a 0 value, whatever I need. And I'm just gonna give it a title for now. Okay, I'm gonna change it in a few minutes. And then everything else I will have to actually set up. So let's take that out. What I'm going to be doing is actually creating the axis. Okay, so that's going to be numeric. The position is this type, and I'm going to be creating 4 tick steps, meaning it's gonna show 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100%. Then I'm gonna specify the series. It's of type gauge. The value is going to be the angle field. This is the minimum and the maximum value. I am going to have a needle. This is the size of the donut because the way a gauge works, it's kind of like a polar chart, but within the shape of a donut. Then I'm adding 2 sectors. This is allowing me to add colors to my gauge, and then I'm specifying the colors. The way this works is the first color is going to be my needle, so that's going to be gray. Then the second value, it's going to be anything before this first value on the sectors. So from 0 to 75, it's going to be a green color. Then from 75 to 95, it's going to be yellow. And 95 and above is going to be red. Okay? And after having this, I'm going to have to add the init component option over here. Okay, and this is going to be basically the same. So I'm gonna have the me scope variable. I'm gonna call parent, and then I'm going to create my socket. So this is going to be loading the socket that I created before. Here, I'm not gonna be using this URL. What I'm going to actually be using is whatever was passed as a parameter. Then I have the callback method. Okay, and here I'm going to change the value for my component. So this comes from a different example, so this will be easier actually because it just have to be me store remove all and me store add data. Okay, so now how do I call this? I think this one should be the easiest one. So I'm gonna go back to the dashboard, gonna put it there, and then I'm gonna replace those over here. So I'm gonna start with this one. Okay, so I'm gonna say X type, and I'm going to use the X type that I set up here. Okay, Then I'm going to specify the URL, which is the URL that I had there a few minutes ago. Okay, this is going to get the CPU held. And I can specify the title directly. So I can just put it here. Okay, and the title is just going to be CPU temp. Okay, and of course I need a flex height of 1. And this is what we have. So those are the three colors that I selected and the values that I have. And this one is updating every second. That's why you can see the needle move a lot faster. Okay. If you don't like how it looks, it's cutting a few things on the edges. I can actually add a body, sorry, an inner padding in there. Let's say of 12 pixels. And it makes the chart a little bit smaller, but we can see a lot more. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same for memory and the same for disk. So basically, I'm just gonna copy whatever I have here, paste it, paste it. Now it's going to have a different title and a different endpoint. So one is memory and the other one is disk. And of course, I'm just gonna give it that title. So this should be memory usage and disk usage. Okay, although if we do it this way, this is going to be creating the same store for all of them. So we gotta be careful. What I can do is just send it its own store for each one. That way it won't fail and it will look a lot better. So let me refresh and show it to you. So now this is what's going on. Okay, so now that we have reached this part, we're pretty much done. I'm gonna move into Sencha Themer and I'm gonna change the style of my application. Of course, I cannot style everything because we're almost running out of time. But let me show you how to style one of those charts that we have been working on. Okay, now that we are ready with our information, what we're going to be doing next is style it. Of course, it would have been a better idea to do this at the beginning, but I didn't want to waste that time at the beginning. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be using Sencha Themer to change the style of the application. And then I'm going to be changing a few things by hand. Okay, now that I have Sencha Themer open, let me look for my project. And there's a few things to take in mind if you're going to do this. First, there shouldn't be any spaces on any of the folders where your project is saved. And same deal with your theme name. So we're just gonna call this dark theme. Then it's gonna give me an option of using toolkits that I have available. In this case, it's only classic. And then I can start with a basic theme. So right now I'm gonna use Triton, but I can use any of the other themes there. So I'm just gonna hit create theme and it's gonna take a few minutes to actually create it. But once it's done, I can go in and modify anything I want. Okay, now here I'm gonna modify a few things. The first thing I want to change is the background color. So instead of using just plain white, I'm gonna use a different color. And I'm going to be doing the same thing for the base color. So now I have the same colors there. Okay, look that it changed the color to something similar to white. Okay, as you can see, the tree doesn't look fine, the tabs don't look that great. If we want to change a few more things, the best idea is to actually go in and change all of the other options. For example, if I don't want the buttons to look just as the default buttons, I can probably just go in and use a different color. So just as an example, I'm going to use something different. Just gonna put it in a yellow color, actually in a green color. Okay, now you can see that my buttons are green. Now that I have created this, I should go back to my project. Okay, go back to my app.json file and make sure that my new theme is there. If that's the case, I can refresh and rebuild my application. So I'm just gonna open a new terminal from over here. Gonna say Sencha app refresh. I'm just gonna say Sencha app build development. And once again, once that is done, I can go and check my application. Let me go into one of my charts. Let's say the refresh chart. I'm going to add a body padding of 12 pixels. Okay, and I'm gonna add a background color of really dark blue. And if we take a look at our application, it's gonna look a little bit different. Of course, we have that white background on our charts. It's something simple to change, but it hasn't been changed by default. Okay, and the same deal with the menu. It looks great. We could have changed that from Sencha Dimmer or directly here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is on the refresh chart, I'm gonna remove the background so we can do it directly inside the Cartesian chart. I'm just gonna say background none. Okay, but the problem with that is that we won't be able to read the text. It's also dark and the grid lines are really white. So let's go in and change that. That's also an easy fix, but we have to know where exactly everything is. So let's start with the actual access. So instead of just having title there, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to have a few more properties. So I'm going to specify the field style and the text. So the actual value is the text and field style will give me the color for this text, okay? And I can do the same thing for the grid. So I don't want those lines to be that clear. So I'm just gonna specify that as stroke style, okay? Let's say that I want this as a darker color. Let's just put something dark gray there, okay? If I want to do the same thing with the label, I can do the same thing. So it'll be something like this, okay? Now I'm just gonna say field style for the label. Just gonna grab that title and put it here. And to change the actual lines, I'm just gonna use a style. And here I can also set up the stroke style, which is also going to be white. And I can actually give it a width if I wanted to, so something different. Okay, let's see how this is working. Let's refresh. And as you can see, now we have something that works a lot better. And of course, I would be doing the same for all the other ones. Okay, but right now we don't have the time. So I hope you enjoyed this webinar. For now, let's move on to our Q&A. Okay, thank you, everybody. I got a bunch of questions while I was presenting. Sorry for not answering before, but since I had a lot of things to go through, I didn't want to spend the time there answering the questions. So first, I'm being asked by Remy if we're gonna get this webinar as a recording. Yeah, it's going to be available soon in our YouTube channel. There you can take the time and check the code if you need to. Um, sorry, somebody else was asking me to zoom in a bit on the code. I couldn't do it right at that moment, but if you watch it on the YouTube channel, you will be able to see me zoom in yourself. I got a couple of tips from Daniel Ramos. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, he mentioned that instead of using the store name and looking for it, that's something else that you could use is just use store ID. Yes, that's right, but I usually choose one way to do it on my webinar and then I'll stick to it, just not to confuse everybody. And I try to not use store IDs, just to have different names for each one. As you noticed at the end, when I had all those three gauges on the right, if I use the store ID, sometimes it doesn't bring the correct information. So I try to do it some other way. However, it's a great way to navigate through stores. So thank you, Daniel. Um, then I got another question from Sam. The question is if everything we saw here can be also done with React. Yes, it can be done with React. I just focus on XJS, but as you know, XJS is a framework, so you can bring all the components into React by using React. So everything that I showed here, it's doable. We have a bunch of videos based on React on our YouTube channel too. So I invite you to see those too. From what I remember, I do go through charts there too, although I don't use WebSockets on that example. If you guys want to learn more about different charts, we have another video where I showed a bunch of other charts there, like radar charts and scatter charts and some others. Let me see. Samuel is asking me if there's a way to build a whole website, not just data-centric sections. Yes, since this is a webinar, I only focused on the charts and dashboard, but I usually create whole applications with Ext.js. Like I was saying, it's a whole framework. So you can build whatever you need. Just take in mind that the power of Ext.js comes uh, with enterprise applications. You can build websites. However, the best thing to do is to build applications, either mobile web applications or just desktop web applications. Uh, XJS handles a lot of data, and it handles it fast and quick. So if you want to build anything with it, you can. You can have a login screen. You can start from one of our different templates. I invite you to visit our examples website. Let me see if I can show you something here. You can go into our kitchen sink, like, oh, sorry, not that, into our kitchen sink, like I was explaining during the webinar. And you can also visit our examples website. On the kitchen sink, you can see everything that you can create, all the components we have. Well, not all of them, but most of the components we have. And on our examples website, you can see our starting templates. So you can create applications that look just like this one. And this is also a template. So you can start your application from this example and just remove the sections you don't need and add what you need. So I hope that helps you out. But like I was saying, it's not just small applications. You can create some really big applications either by using code like I was doing or using RapidX.js as a visual interface inside of Microsoft Code, or using Sencha Architect to create your whole application in a low code environment. Let's see. I was also asked by Samuel if there is a way to clean out boilerplate code after installing a new XJS app. I don't have the time to go through all the details, but when you create an application, as you were seeing, uh, you you can create it on a developer, on a QA, or on a production environment. If you use the production environment, it will minify your application. It will get rid of what you don't need, and also it will obfuscate your application. I don't know if that's exactly what you were looking for, or if you were looking to minify the code you were creating, having less repetitive code. But if that's the case, I'm already over the hour, so sorry, I cannot go into any more detail. Um, Somebody else asked once again about YouTube videos. Yeah, on our YouTube channel, just go to youtube.com at Sencha, and there you can see all our webinars. And also we have a bunch of videos inside our official site. So just look for resources there. and you will be able to find a lot more videos and data there. Okay. Um, Let me see. And also a little bit more information about using, let's see, fashion, which would have been really awesome for people who don't know. Uh, right now, I cannot think on the top of my mind of some information about fashion and Sencha Themer. I know we have a webinar about Sencha Themer over here about changing the fashion and styling. That's all I can think right now. Um, and let's see. Sorry, I got a couple more questions from Claude. Being told that we have run out of time. I'll try to answer you by email. Please send me an email. My email account, well, it's not listed over here. It's just my name, andres.vilalba@sencha.com. Send me an email and I'll try to answer both of your questions on a later time. Sorry about that. I want to thank everybody. We're going to have more webinars in the future, and hopefully we can help you out, learn a little bit more about our framework, and see how XJS can help you out with your projects. So once again, thank you everybody, and I hope to see you soon on one of our next webinars.